myself on mute.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Managing a Remote Workforce. I'm Jolene Carey-Pace, the Program Coordinator at the Wilkes University Small Business Development Center. I'm happy that all of you could join us this morning. Before we begin, I would like to thank Ken Anderson for partnering with us again and sharing his presentation today. Just a quick note to please put yourselves on mute so that we can avoid having any background noise. Also, as we go along, you can type any questions that you might have into the chat box, and there will also be time at the end of the presentation to ask any questions you might have. And now I will turn the program over to Ken. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well on this brisk November morning. We are going to talk about how you manage a remote workforce. Many companies have, I guess even most companies have sent their employees home, and a large portion of our workforce is working from home. So the question is, how do we support those employees? How do we help them and at the same time keep our companies secure, keep our information protected, keep our employees connected, and even, if possible, increase productivity? So we're going to take a look at some of the challenges that are involved and some recommendations for getting around those challenges and improving things. So there's three key components to this that we'll discuss this morning: security, collaboration, and productivity as well. So to introduce myself, I'm Ken Anderson. I am the Director of Managed Services for Ethixa Solutions. We are a managed service provider servicing Northeast Pennsylvania, and we are very heavily involved in helping companies with just what we're going to be talking about today. Staying secure, keeping information and data protected, and mobilizing the workforce. And we've done a number of things with respect to that, whether it's setting up networking and security on internal networks, or moving things out to the cloud to make it more easily accessible while still remaining secure. Myself, I've been involved in IT for over 30 years now. It seems strange to say that, but it's true. And so as we go along this morning and we talk about these things, please use the chat box. I don't want to be just a talking head today. I'd love to have you involved for anything that you might want to know, or anything you might have to add or question. So please use the chat box, drop in some questions, and we'll see if we can't tailor this a little bit to all of you. And I'm sure each of you has something a little different that you'd like to get out of this morning. There's going to be a number of things we'll talk about this morning, and most of these things, these points, are recommendations or suggestions, and every person, every company, every strategy is a bit different. So it's not a one-size-fits-all type of solution that can be put in place. So many of these things may not work for you, depending on how your company and how your data centers and how your workforce is structured. But hopefully it'll give you some ideas and things to look into and make you think a little bit, and you can find a strategy that works for you. So again, because it's not one size fits all, please feel free to use the chat, and we'll get a bit interactive. If you run a company, or even if you work for a company, security is going to be one of the foremost things on your mind. Once, when you're in an office environment, your data is or can be contained fairly easily. You put it in a data center or on a server or somewhere in your office building, you lock it away, you only let people that are in the office connect to it, and your IT staff is available. It's a single point of contact for the most part, and you limit internet access to it and all of those things. And so the move to a work from home or a remote workforce is much different and is very challenging for an office-centric company to adjust to, because now, instead of managing that single office environment that can be fairly well controlled, now you have access points and connection points everywhere. Each employee has their own home network that's now connecting some way. And so the attack surface that bad actors, hackers, or whatever you want to call them, can use to gain entry or access information that they shouldn't have greatly increases. And that's a very big challenge. In addition to the increased attack surface, now network traffic has dramatically increased. You'll find more emails, more people sharing files, increased usage of cloud services, and a number of other things that make it even easier beyond just the increased attack surface for other people to access that data. To compound the problem, it's also harder to provide quality IT support to a workforce that's scattered all over the place. They're not in one building. You can't just go 2 offices down the hall and help somebody restart their computer or check a network connection or any of these things. And so if you are a company that has your own IT staff, it's much harder to provide IT support to each individual person in their own home where they're working. In addition to that, many companies didn't have computers available for each person to take home to work, which means that employees may now be using their own personal computers to access company information and do their work, just as a, there wasn't much choice in the matter. That's just what wound up happening. So now they're using computers that are shared for both work and personal use, which again increases the potential for viruses, for other people using that computer to do something on it that could cause a problem. And that's a difficulty as well. And also because employees are scattered and not as connected as they once were, it has increased the likelihood of a phishing attack being successful. It's not as easy to check on Bob at the office next door to see if he actually sent that email, and people are more likely to just click on an email that they think may be legitimate. There's not as much communication going back and forth. So that's another thing that is problematic. So we know about these problems. We've seen them. We're trying to deal with them. How do we address some of these issues? Number one, let's address the home office networking environment. And really key in this is to take a hard look at what is available on the market and either provide a router or require a good router, or at least recommend a modern, reputable router for every single home that is using your data. The home router is really important, and there are lots of different routers available, but I would recommend a name brand, not an off-brand. Off-brands are made who knows where, China, Korea, whatever, and off-brand routers may not, may be more cheaply made for one thing, but they also may have technology in them that's doing things that we don't understand. So I would recommend a good, reputable, name brand router, whether it's a Linksys, a Cisco, an Asus, a Netgear, even a higher end business router like a Sonic Wall or something of that nature, if possible. will go a long way towards protecting a home network environment. And don't just stick it in there or have your employees stick it in their home, because the router should be configured. It should be updated when it's installed with the most recent firmware. There have been a lot of vulnerabilities identified recently in routers, and updating the firmware is critical to protecting against that. And also requiring a secure Wi-Fi password. Don't make the Wi-Fi password the dog's name Spot or Wi-Fi or something like that. But just like a password for logging into a website, the password for logging into a Wi-Fi network should be more secure, so that it can't be guessed. Otherwise, you could have unknown people just accessing Wi-Fi networks randomly, and that's not a good solution. You can also implement guest Wi-Fi on those routers, so that there's a primary network that would be used for business purposes, and then a separate guest Wi-Fi network that can be given out to other people, so that the communications for business and for personal use are separate and not as easily accessed. Something else that's a good thing to think about is implementing a VPN. And a VPN is basically an encrypted tunnel through a connection that keeps your data protected from the rest of the connection. So it's encrypted at one end, it's encrypted at the other end, and all of the information that travels through that connection is encrypted, and other people on that same network or on that same connection, even if there's eavesdroppers and hackers, wouldn't be able to see that. And this is really important, particularly if you're using a Wi-Fi network. Or particularly a public, I would never suggest using a public Wi-Fi network like at a coffee shop or something without going through a VPN tunnel, because you just don't know who could be sniffing your data. There are a number of consumer, easily accessed, easily usable consumer type VPNs available. NordVPN, private internet access, Surfshark, to name a few, that you could recommend your employees use, particularly if they're on Wi-Fi. It's not as important if they're in a fairly protected wired network in their home, but certainly if they go anywhere else, or if they're using a Wi-Fi network, using a VPN to transmit and receive data is a very good idea. In addition to that, if you're running a company and your employees need to access things on your internal network, probably one of the only ways I would recommend doing that would be through a site-to-site VPN, setting up a VPN connection in the office that is required in order to access any of that data, because you don't want to expose that data to anybody else on the internet. So requiring a connection with a username and a password at the very least, hopefully even with multi-factor authentication, would be a very good idea. The problem is, if you've got a lot of people that need to connect, setting up the infrastructure to allow everybody to connect over a VPN can be challenging and expensive. So there are other ways that we can do things with data to get everybody connected, and we'll talk about those as we move forward this morning. Some security recommendations as we continue. We talked about everybody going home. Now they may be using personal devices or shared devices or mobile devices. And there are some technologies out there that help us that help companies may set a standard or a set of requirements for allowing access to company data. And that's called mobile device management. What mobile device management does is it allows a company to determine the minimum standard required before a connection is allowed. So a good example of this would be for storing company email or accessing company email on a cell phone. Cell phones are mobile, they're portable, they're easy to use, but they're also easily lost, which means somebody else could access them. And if you've got sensitive data in email and your employee loses their phone, well, somebody else might be able to pick it up. They might be able to get into the phone. They might be able to access all of that information. So some of the things that you can do with mobile device management are to require encryption, require that that entire device be encrypted so that even if the phone is lost and somebody plugs it into another device, they don't have access to the data on it. Set password requirements at a minimum. Make sure that there's a 6-digit PIN on that phone so that it can't just be opened by anybody. Require antivirus on the device, require that system updates be at a certain level. And it's not just mobile phones, tablets, laptops, even desktops can have all of these requirements set for any device that is connecting to internal data and internal networks. And there's a number of solutions available for this. Manage Engine has one, Citrix has one. Microsoft Intune, if you're on Office 365, Intune is an Office 365 add-on that you can enable to set up. And that's what we do in our company is we use Intune to require that anybody logging into SharePoint or email or any of our company information has a strict set of requirements that they have to adhere to. Has to be a certain operating system level, has to be running antivirus, has to have a password on the phone has to be encrypted, those types of things. And that's very important, and I think it's only going to become more and more important going into the future as we continue to stay mobile. Email is a prime target for people that want to do things to you that you wouldn't care for. It's easy to send emails to people, and it can be difficult to identify whether an email is good or not. So some of the things that that we would recommend implementing as soon as possible are antivirus, anti-malware, and anti-phishing technologies specifically for your email. I know most companies at least have these things running on each individual system, but there are also email protection services that can be implemented on the server end, which is helpful because that can stop a lot of attacks before they ever get to each individual system. And Barracuda, Mimecast, again, Microsoft has a solution that's an add-on for Office 365. So if you're on Office 365, you can look at that. But Barracuda and Mimecast have some best-in-class protection. And if any bit, nothing is 100%. Stuff's going to get through, but anything you can filter out before it gets to the desktop or laptop or phone, before the employee sees it, is going to be very helpful. And I would say even more important than that is staff training. The staff, your employees, are your first and your best line of defense, or they can be a weak point in your security. And through no fault of their own, they may not be aware of what a phishing email looks like, what the methods that are being used to defraud companies, how malware comes in, and all of those types of things. So it's really important that the staff be trained in best practices, that they know how to identify a malware, a phishing email, that they know how to suss out somebody who's trying to commit fraud in a phone call. It's not just email. A lot of attacks start with some social engineering with just a phone call. And you should have some company policies in place that are clear for the employees, and make your employees a strength in protecting your information instead of a weak point. Nothing is 100%, so you can take all the measures you want to train your employees, to install antivirus protection, to improve your routers, to set up mobile device management and lock things down. But there is no 100% perfect solution that's going to protect you forever. So it's important to have contingencies. And one of the most important ones is backups. You want to back up your company data, but just having a backup isn't enough. If you can't restore that backup, it's not going to be any good to you. So have a backup that you make sure you access. It should be stored off-site in case something happens to the location where it's being run, and it should be encrypted, and it should be tested. Back up things, but then test the restore. Make sure you can get data from them. Another thing you can do to protect your data is, instead of having everybody if everybody's outside accessing inside, well, that's no longer such a protected location. Now it's a security hole. So consider moving your data to a cloud solution, whether it's SharePoint or Google or something in Amazon's data center. Because it can be easier to manage security in an environment like that. Those data centers have a lot of experience in protecting information and data, and their reputation hinges upon it. So it can be easier, instead of trying to keep your information in the confines of your building. Consider moving it out. It's not something you do just at the snap of a finger or without thought, and it's not the right solution for everyone, but it is something to evaluate and see if it's right for you. Another way to protect your information is to keep it from being stored on those offsite computers at all. Everybody's connecting from a laptop or a desktop at home, but there is a way to keep any of that information, any of your company information, from ever sitting on those home computers. And the way to do that is with a virtual desktop solution. So a virtual desktop solution is almost like the old dumb terminal or mainframe days, where you'd have a dumb terminal and all the processing is done on the server side. And that's what happens here. You'd log into a desktop. Your employees would log into a desktop that looks like their normal desktop, but it's not actually running on their computer. It's running in the data center or in a server, on a server somewhere else. And they're just getting screenshots of what's happening on that server, and the data never leaves the server. So that allows you to set up a virtual desktop sitting somewhere else and keeping your data in that data center. And there are solutions from AWS. They've got their virtual workspace solution. Microsoft has Azure desktops. Citrix has solutions. VMware has solutions. And depending on how protected you want to keep your information, that may be a very good solution. We've developed solutions for mortgage companies that leverage this technology, because it's very important to keep that data safe. So that covers most of, we could speak more about security, but that covers most of it. And so now we'll talk about some collaboration challenges. With everyone in the company being in a different location, it's much harder to collaborate and to connect and to communicate with each other than it is when you're in an office environment. You can't just call a meeting and get together in a conference room anymore. You don't stop by for coffee. You don't. There's a real lack of connection, and with that lack of connection comes a difficulty in communication, and also, as we've talked about with the networking, there can be difficulty in accessing company assets when people move home. And through that lack of connection and communication, there can also be a lack of direction and clear goals on the part of the employee. And if the employees don't know what they're supposed to be doing and what their targets are, productivity is going to suffer, and the company overall is going to suffer. So what do we do about these types of issues? One of the first things I'd recommend is to schedule meetings, particularly if you're a supervisor or a boss. Schedule meetings with your team, check in with them, do weekly team stand-ups at least, but also set an agenda. Don't just set a meeting to have a meeting. Set an agenda, email the agenda out, and long rambling meetings aren't going to do anybody any good. So try to keep them focused, try to keep them clear. But at the same time, while I say keep them focused and keep them clear and set an agenda, you don't need to limit them just to work. And remember, people aren't getting the social interaction that they have in the past. And that's really important for bringing teams together. And without those social interactions and friendships and camaraderie, something gets lost in the mix. So encourage some talk about, how people are doing, what's going on, what's happening, and encourage your employees to talk outside of those meetings as well and set up virtual coffees and that type of thing, to some team building exercises like that is helpful. When you have those meetings, you want to make sure that you have clear goals. Clarify the goals for your employees, the short-term goals, long-term goals, checkpoints. Encourage them to set their own goals on a daily basis, and stay in touch with them. Check in to make sure that they're doing okay. See if they need anything. Find out what challenges they're having. Are they having trouble with their internet connection? Is the screen on their laptop an impediment? All of those types of things. And although you do want to stay in touch, you still want to avoid micromanagement. So there's a fine line there between touching base and excuse me, and empowering your team and micromanaging them, and which prevents them from getting things done. The work from home atmosphere is much different. So you want to be able to be flexible. It gives you the ability to be flexible, much more so than when you have an office environment. So take advantage of that and use that. Trust your staff to get things done. Just give them the tools that they need, give them the checkpoints, the goals, and follow up with them, and let them do their thing. You also want to be able to leverage the tools that are available and provide those critical tools to your employees. Even 5 years ago, this would have been more difficult because the tools that we have now are in a much more mature state than they were 5 years ago. There's a much higher availability, and there are a lot of tools available to help, specifically to help with collaboration. We've always had email, so that's available. I wouldn't say always, but in in recent history we've had email. But in addition to email, we also have things like Microsoft Teams and Slack and other tools that are designed specifically for collaboration, tracking messages, sharing files, scheduling, and keeping all of those things in groups and in projects and connected, so that it's much easier to deal on a team basis or a project basis than it used to be. And because there are so many tools, it's important to choose these tools wisely. You want to focus on quality, not on quantity. Don't just throw every new tool that pops up at your team, because they're going to be overwhelmed. Pick and choose carefully and get the best out of them. In addition to the software tools, there's also some technology tools and hardware tools that that you should help your employees with. Webcams, obviously, most of us are on a webcam now, and if you're not able to be face-to-face, the webcam is the next best thing. Headsets and speaker phones are very important for quality communication. And I think you'll find that a lot of people that have gone home to work are on laptops, and sitting at the kitchen table working on a laptop is not a good work experience. It's going to lead to ergonomic issues, back pain, leaning down. So if a desktop is a much better solution, or if not a desktop, at least a monitor, mouse, and keyboard that plugs into the laptop, a good desk chair, a good desk. These are all important things to, and I think they're overlooked a lot of times. And so talk to your employees, find out what they're doing, find out what their needs are. If you can provide things for them, great. At least make recommendations and help them out in those things. And again, when you're buying gadgets, and I would avoid weird names and off-brand gadgets, because you don't know what might be going on inside the little tiny tech chips on those. I get a little paranoid, I guess, but as an IT guy. Assisting employees with technical issues is going to be important. Most employees aren't going to be tech people. They're just trying to use the laptop, the software, everything else to do their jobs. And now it's harder for them to turn to an IT staff that's on site to deal with these problems. So help them know who they should call, who they should contact, how they should get this IT support. Leverage your on-staff IT support if you have it, if you can, to at least do some remote support. There are some remote support tools out there, so take a look at those if that's what you need to do. Or you can enlist third-party support. It's really hard for a company to provide quality support to everybody in their company when they're scattered all over. So there are some third-party IT support. I'm not here to sell our services, but this is one of the things that we do. We provide in-home support for the employees of companies. We don't work for the employees, we work for the company and provide that third-party support. And again, we talked about providing or recommending routers, but you can do the same thing with webcams and phones and headsets. And it can be a difficult thing for your employees to figure out which devices are good and which ones are not. Online reviews are not always what they're cracked up to be. And as you build experience as a company, it'd be good to build a recommended list of these kind of tools. Another key component we didn't really discuss much is the internet service to your employees. If they're connecting to get data, if they're doing meetings and webcams and all of these types of things, it's very important that they have good quality internet connections. And so as a as a business, you may have leverage with the internet providers to get your employees better service or better technical support, better bandwidth. And I would use that and leverage that to help your employees as much as possible, because it's only going to improve the situation for your company also. Productivity. Most of what we've been talking about really comes down to this at the end, is making sure that your company is productive and your employees are productive. And a happy employee is a productive employee. So some of the things that we've been talking about all come into play here. Encourage staff connections. People are lonely. It's tough when you can't get out and do the things that you used to do. So encourage your staff to connect with one another, and also provide employees with support wherever you can, whether it's with equipment, monitors, like we said, for your laptops or keyboards or webcams and those type of things. And the bandwidth issue is important. And also don't forget about ergonomics. At least talk to your employees about what their work environment is like. Are they sitting at the kitchen table? Do they have their own separate workspace? Do they have a good chair to sit in? Are they getting up and moving around every day and getting exercise? Are they taking breaks? It's even easier to overwork when you're working from home than it is to underwork. So check on all those types of things and find out. And the biggest key, I would say, that gets missed far too often is training for employees. And we talked about training for identifying security weaknesses and holes, but there's also other types of training. Train your employees for success. Train them to leverage their strengths for the like taking breaks and how to work from home successfully and productively without having a nervous breakdown. Make sure they understand company policies and best practices and all of those types of things. Training is really important and can't be understated. And that's all I have for the presentation this morning. Does anybody have any questions? No questions? All righty.
Okay. If there are no questions for Ken, we'll go ahead and conclude today's webinar. I would like to thank Ken for being here with us today and sharing his insights on managing a remote workforce. I know we all benefited from your talk today, certainly. Just a few housekeeping notes. I will be making available the recording of this training on the Wilkes University SBDC YouTube channel, and I will email that link to all attendees. Also, I will be emailing a link to a post-event survey so that we can determine which of our resources will best suit your needs and what topics you would like to see as training sessions in the future. With that, I want to thank everyone for attending this training. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us at the SBDC. I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you at future webinars. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jolene.
Thanks, Ken. Bye, everyone.
Have a great day, everyone. Enjoy your weekend coming up.